This video is going to be part 1 of snow and ice bases. Part 2 should be coming shortly, however for now let's focus on part 1. To start off with, you need a cutting mat preferably, so you don't damage the surface you're going to be cutting on. Next, what we need is to get some acetate, which is a clear plastic, and we want to figure out approximately the depth of size we need in regards to the base we're going to apply the acetate later on. And then we need to score the acetate, and afterwards we can bend it and break the piece off. And then I've turned it around and I've cut it again, so we now have squares. For a lot of my miniatures I might only use 2 of these squares. That tends to be good enough. However, for this particular miniature I've decided to do it a third time as well, just because I want to add a little bit of extra detail. Once we've got our 3 squares, the next thing we need to do is we need to cut the corners off, because obviously we're applying these onto circular bases, so our pieces of acetate need to fit into the area of the circle, but we don't need to cut perfect circles, and you'll see why later. Here what I'm doing is I'm holding the acetate next to the underside of the miniature so I can see where the miniature would connect onto the base. The reason why I'm doing this is I'm trying to make it look like where the ice is cracking from the weight of what's above the ice. In this case it's a polar bear, so you can see how the footfall of the polar bear is making the ice crack underneath it. And then I'm applying some scab and blight dinge into those areas just as a marker, so I know where those areas are. Now we have our markers on the first piece. I've turned the piece over so the area where the paint is now on the underside, and I have scored several lines stemming from that point of the marker. The thing to remember here though is you're only trying to score the plastic this time. You don't want to cut all the way through, you don't need to. Once you finish with the first piece, apply the second piece over the first one, and you'll see the areas where the markers are. Put one line to each of those markers, and then you can remove the second one from the first and repeat the process. When this is finished, repeat the process onto the third piece. Now you can see what it looks like when all 3 pieces are overlaid onto one another. You'll notice the outside edges aren't perfectly aligned with one another, but that's perfectly fine. That will not be a problem. In real ice, where the cracks appear next to one another, sometimes you'll notice there's a foggy look about the ice. So to replicate this, what I've used is a little bit of Ulthuan grey in some of the areas where 2 lines connect together. But I've only done this in the first piece of the acetate. On the second and the third piece I don't do it, because you don't want to go too over the top with the effect. Next it's time to use some super glue to glue the 3 pieces of the acetate onto your base. The main thing to remember is you want to line up the markers on all 3 pieces of the acetate when applying the glue, and you only need to apply a small amount of glue. You're not trying to fix the whole thing down, you're just trying to apply it in a few places so it stays in line, so the markers stay lined up together. And you'll also want to press down the acetate while the super glue is drying to make sure it's flat, otherwise it might stick up slightly. The base is going to want to be painted in scab and blight dinge, both on the top and the sides. Most people look at ice and they make this presumption that it's going to be blue, but if you actually look at some pictures, do a bit of research on Google, you'll notice the ice tends to actually be more of a grey colour than a blue, because obviously it's cold, there's not a lot of light. Because you don't get a lot of UV light from the sun, the ice tends to look more grey than it would blue, hence why you should use scab and blight dinge. Once the super glue has had time to dry, the next thing we want to do now is we want to apply a resin onto the top of the base, and make sure we spread the resin out, covering all the areas. There are different resins on the market. Most of them are a 2-part mix resins. However, the resin I'm using doesn't need to be mixed like that. You can use it straight out of the tub, and then once you've finished applying it where you want, You just have to use a UV light, or otherwise known as a black light, to make the resin go hard. You'll notice there's a few parts where it looks a little bit rough, but that's not a problem because that'll soon get fixed. Now we're going to apply some PVA glue into various parts of the base, afterwards using some snow flock, and then give it some time to dry. Once it's had time to dry, remove the loose flock so you can see the areas where you applied the PVA glue the first time round, and then you can reapply some PVA glue again and go through the process once again, and you can build up the process as many times as you like, but this way helps to give a level of how thick the snow is in different areas. And now you've finished the work on your base, so you can glue your miniature onto the base and you're finished. If you like the video, remember to like, share, and click on the button on the lower right hand side to subscribe.